Welcome to The Straight Stitch, a podcast about sewing and other fiber arts. This is episode 101, and my name is Janet Szabo. I'll be your guide as we explore all things sewing. It feels like a long time since I've been in front of this microphone, and I guess it probably is because I recorded a couple of episodes before I began traveling at the end of October, and here we are well into November. I hope you all enjoyed the listener question episode. I thought the questions were great, and I certainly will do another one of those in the future. So if you have questions, send them along. You don't have to wait until I ask for them. I will put together listener question episodes whenever I have a pile of questions that need answers. So just to catch you up on what's been happening, on October 20th, my friend Elaine and I drove to Spokane. Elaine's sister lives in Seattle, and when their schedules permit, Elaine sometimes rides over there with me for a visit. We broke the trip up into 2 days because this time of year, when it's dark in the morning and it's dark in the evening, I'm not excited about the possibility of hitting a deer. So it's just easier for us to break up the trip by stopping in Spokane. On Tuesday, I dropped Elaine off at her sister's and I went down to Tacoma to have dinner with some friends of mine. And then I got a hotel room at the airport because Wednesday morning I flew from Seattle to Cleveland. I grew up in Cleveland and my mother still lives there and most of my extended family. And I try to get there once a year for a visit. I did take some English paper piecing with me, but I actually didn't do any sewing on this trip. I ended up doing some knitting instead because my friend Janet, who works at the quilt store, and variously, depending on who's talking about us, she and I are referred to as the other Janet because there's two of us. And she asked me before I left if I would knit a Mobius cowl. She has one, and another friend of hers was admiring it, and Janet asked me if I would do it on commission. So we agreed on a price, and she bought me the yarn, and I took the yarn and the needles with me because I thought this would be a great plain knitting project. It's a 4-hour flight from Seattle to Cleveland. So there I was at SeaTac waiting for my plane to board, trying to do Kat Bordy's Mobius cast on. And I had watched her video on YouTube, which was very helpful. I also had the instructions from the store, but you know my abysmal spatial perception abilities, and I just couldn't see it. And it took me 3 attempts to get the cast on correct. But I finally did, and I did knock out the Mobius on the plane ride. And when I got to Cleveland, I decided that I wanted to knit a few more. I'm thinking that I could make these and sell them at the craft co-op sale next fall. I ended up going to Michael's and getting some Woolies Thick and Quick because one skein I discovered makes a Mobius cowl. And the price point is good because I'm going to have to be selling these. And I'm not opposed to buying really nice yarn at yarn shops, but to spend $20 on a skein of yarn and then have to price it so that I could sell it at the craft co-op sale, I think would put it out of the reach of most people around here. So I'm going with the Woolies Thick and Quick. It makes a perfectly lovely cowl. I made one for myself, and I've been wearing it for the last week or so. The Mobius cowls are a nice break from the prayer shawl knitting. My mother and I did go to a store in Middleburg Heights, Ohio, called Pins and Needles, which is a lovely store. They happened to be having a customer appreciation sale, and it was mobbed in there. So we walked around, but I didn't see anything that I couldn't live without, so I didn't buy anything. But that store is certainly on my list of places to visit anytime I'm in Cleveland. I got back on a plane Sunday morning and flew back to Seattle. And thanks to crossing 3 time zones, I landed at SeaTac at 12:30 in the afternoon. So I grabbed my suitcase and drove up to the ferry terminal in downtown Seattle and took the ferry over to Bainbridge Island and then drove to Port Angeles, Washington. My older daughter and her husband, the ones that were living in Alaska, just moved to Port Angeles. He'll be starting a new job, and they bought a house. It really is the perfect house for them. They wanted something secluded because where they were living in Alaska, they got a lot of cruise ship traffic, and some of the cruise ship passengers were not very respectful of the fact that they were walking around people's property. So they close on the house on November 13th. The movers bring their furniture on the 14th, and my son-in-law starts his new job on November 17th. Right now, they're living with his parents, who also live there. So I spent a few days with all of them doing some visiting and shopping and hanging out. I love my son-in-law's parents. We always have such a good time when we're together. After that, I drove back to the ferry terminal and took the ferry back to Seattle and went to the Airbnb that I usually stay in when I'm in Seattle and spent a few days with my younger daughter. She and her boyfriend and I went to a Kraken game. My daughter's apartment is 3 blocks from Climate Pledge Arena where the Kraken play, and her boyfriend had asked for tickets to the game for his birthday present, and I was happy to oblige. I have decided that hockey is my new favorite sport. I'm giving up on the Cleveland Browns, and I am now a Kraken fan. While I was in Seattle, I drove up to Quilting Mayhem in Snohomish. My friend Dina and I had been there over the summer when we were in Seattle, and I wanted to go back. It's a great store. Snohomish is a lovely little town. And while I was walking around the store, I found the new, brand spanking new Bella Quilt Coat pattern from byAnnie. And when I got to the register, the girl that was helping me said that they had just put the pattern out that morning. I knew it was coming and I hadn't seen it yet, so I was really excited to be able to pick up a copy of it. And you'll hear more about that pattern as we go along. I went to Pacific Fabrics, as I always do, and I have to be careful because I tend to get overwhelmed in that store, even if I go with a list. And I had an idea of some things that I needed for some future projects. I was walking around the store and I happened to look at the shelf where they had the coating fabric, like the wool Meltons and things like that. And there was a bolt of Hugo Boss deadstock. It was a gorgeous black and slightly charcoal tweed pattern with lime green flecks of silk running through it. I looked at it. I thought this would make a beautiful, beautiful coat. I love lime green. It was $75 a yard, and I would need 4 yards to make a coat. And I stood there and argued with myself for about 20 minutes, and in the end, I did not buy the fabric. I'm going back at Thanksgiving to Seattle, and if it's still there, I'm going to buy myself some, even if it's only enough to make a tote bag. I ended up buying some fabric to make a skirt, and I bought the Brittany vest pattern by Melly and Me, and I called it good. I drove home on Friday after being gone for basically two full weeks, and got home Friday evening. The husband was very happy to see me. I was very happy to see him. I had a couple of days to rest, and then I hit the ground running again. On Monday morning, I had a machine mastery class at the store to teach. I've done 2 podcast interviews this week, and yesterday I tried to sew. I didn't jump right back into a bunch of projects. What I tried to do was be deliberate and thoughtful. I made a list of what I want to accomplish this month, or actually before the end of the year. And It's amazing to me how the queue kind of exploded because my younger daughter asked me if I could embroider a baby blanket for a shower gift for her. And my husband would like me to make insulated curtains for the rental house. The store got a new pattern in, the Burnside Bibs by Sew House 7, and they would like a class for that, which means I have to make up a sample. And I also want to make up this Bella Quilt Coat pattern. They're also going to have that pattern in stock, so I would like to have a store sample for them. So while I was there, I picked up some fabric to make the sample, and when I got home, I traced the pattern, and yesterday I was going to at least get the pieces quilted and possibly put together. I actually did make the lining on Thursday. I had a few hours, so I knocked out the lining. The way this coat is constructed, you make the outside part of the coat with the fashion fabric and the batting, and the lining is made separately and attached at the end of the process. When I made my jacket for Bernina University, I quilted sandwiches that were the fashion fabric, the batting, and the lining all together, and then cut the pattern pieces out of those quilt sandwiches. So the construction on the Bella Quilt Coat is a little bit different, but I want to try it because I think it's good to try different methods. You never know which one you're going to like. I sat down at my Q20 yesterday morning with my quilt sandwiches, and I started quilting them. So I'm doing view A of the pattern, which is the body with a contrasting yoke. So I had to quilt those sections separately and then sew them together. The construction is actually pretty clever. I'm liking it very much so far. I got the body pieces done and I started to quilt the sleeves, and all of a sudden the foot fell off of my Q20 quilting machine and the needle hit it, and the machine just kind of went bonkers. It made a loud noise. I was quilting at top speed. I stopped immediately, but I know enough about machines to know what happens when a needle hits a foot or a ruler or the throat plate, and this was not good. So I stopped and I cleaned everything out, and I took out the broken needle and I put the machine back together, and I could tell that it wasn't going to sew properly because the needle bar is binding at the bottom of the stroke. So I called the store because the owner's son, Ryan, is the tech, and I figured he could tell me if this was a catastrophe or not. And I also wanted to get on his schedule for a repair. We talked for about 10 minutes. He and I talk about machines fairly frequently. He knows that I understand the mechanics, so he doesn't try to sugarcoat it or speak in layperson terms. He gives me all the technical information and told me what he thought was probably going on. It's not a catastrophe. He's pretty sure we can fix this. It may just need an adjustment. He may have to replace some parts. The good news is that he had a service call out in my area for another lady who had a Q-Series machine, but she had just called him that morning to tell him that she was able to resolve the problem. So the service call appointment on Monday morning was free. So he slid my machine into that service call appointment, and he's going to be out here on Monday morning, bright and early, and we're going to see about fixing this machine. He thinks he can just make the adjustments, but he said he will bring the replacement parts just in case something needs to be replaced. And at this point, I don't care what it costs or how long it takes, but I have to have this machine up and running. After I talked to him, I went and looked at the machine because I didn't know how that foot came off. But after looking at it, I was able to piece together what happened. So I was quilting these quilt sandwiches, which were on the smallish side, certainly smaller than a wall hanging, some of them. And I had pulled out my Bernina gripper rings, which are plastic rings with grippy stuff on the bottom. And you put these on top of your quilt sandwich, and they've got little handles on them, and they allow you to move the quilt sandwich around. Normally I use gloves or paddles, but for small pieces, I really like these gripper rings. Unfortunately, the cutout in the gripper ring is only about 3/4 of an inch wide, and it's a little difficult to get it around the foot, to get it to a point where I can quilt with it. And what I usually end up doing is I slide it around the needle bar above the foot. Unfortunately, as I was putting the gripper ring on and taking it off, I was inadvertently hitting that bracket arm that keeps the foot on the Bernina. So if you've never seen a Bernina, their foot system it's not a screw-in foot or a snap-on foot. There's a little bracket with an arm that comes down, and I apparently had hit the arm with the gripper ring, taking it off the machine. It was a dumb mistake on my part, although I'm not crazy about that foot attachment system on the Bernina for exactly that reason. I don't think it's quite as secure as having a foot that screws onto the machine. But be that as it may, I know that, and I probably won't use those gripper rings in the future because of that. When something like that happens, it's really easy to get derailed. I was mad at myself for something that I thought I could have prevented. My schedule went all to pieces because I was planning to put that jacket together today, and now I can't. I really didn't have anything else ready to go in the queue, so what I ended up doing was I cleaned my sewing area. I've got a stack of pot holders that I'm making, so I trimmed the corners of those because I need them to be ready to bind. And then I finally decided to go to the kitchen, and I made Salisbury steak and mashed potatoes and a huge salad for dinner, which should tell you something about how I was feeling because I don't like to cook. So for me to voluntarily go to the kitchen to do something means that I didn't want to be in my sewing room. I do have some other things in the queue. I want to make the Chloe coat from Sew Over It. You can tell that November is a month of coats because I've got several coat patterns in the queue. It doesn't look like a horribly complicated pattern, but I want to make a muslin of it just to see if there's anything that I need to pay attention to and to check the size before I cut into my good fabric. I have a gorgeous black and turquoise and emerald green tweed fabric that I bought last year intending to use it for a coat, and I think this will be a great pattern. Trying to find fabric to use for a muslin for something like that, these are the times that I really miss Joann Fabrics because I could go in there and I was usually able to find something on the clearance rack that I could use to make a muslin, but I haven't been able to find much. I finally ended up at Hobby Lobby, and they have some polyester corduroy. So I got 4 yards of that because it happened to be 30% off this week, and I think it was $11 a yard. So, I mean, that's reasonable. I don't mind spending $25 or $30 on fabric to make a muslin, but I certainly don't want to use something that's $59 or $60 a yard without testing the pattern first. And if this works, I'll have a wearable muslin. I'll have another coat that I can just throw on when I need something. Other women like to buy shoes. I have something about coats. I don't know what that's about, but I really do like to have a variety of coats to choose from, so I just go with it. I still need to finish my Can Do Patterns retro sling bag. I literally have 3 seams to sew on this bag, and I just need to get out to the garage where the industrial sewing machine is and sew the seams. I have to attach the zipper gusset to the front, and I have to attach the zipper gusset to the back, and I need to bind those seams, and that is literally it. I'm a little bit nervous about breaking another machine, though. I'm thinking that I'm serving as a horrible warning, not a good example. I'm also thinking that, maybe something's just going on in the environment, because I know a couple of other people who have had similar experiences this week. I had the piano tuner out to work on my piano this week, and he arrived and he was all frantic because he had started at 5:30 that morning, and I was the last appointment of the day, and he didn't get to my house until 4:30. So it was a long day for him. And then the next morning, I met him at our church because he was also tuning the piano at the church. That piano, it was built in 1908, so it's something of an antique, although it's in excellent shape. But as he was working on it, he discovered a couple of things that he needed to fix, and it threw his schedule out of whack again for a second day. And I just think, I don't know whether it was the full moon or something else is going on, but I think that sometimes there are just rhythms of life and the way things go, and sometimes you have a week when you're the bug, and sometimes you have a week when you're the windshield. One of the questions that I get most often is, how do I find my sojo again? And I'm going to have an interview in a couple of weeks with someone who has a great story to tell about that. But it's something that I've been thinking about this week, because right now I really don't have a desire to sew. And that's not a good thing, because I have a lot of projects that don't have hard and fast deadlines, but they have deadlines. I didn't sew for 2 entire weeks while I was traveling, and I don't want that to be the kind of thing where it just goes on, because the longer you go without sewing, sometimes the harder it is to start it up again. In other news, while I travel, while I'm in my car driving across Washington State, I like to catch up on my podcast listening. And I'm a fan of the Seamwork podcast, so I caught up on all of those episodes. And I also belong to the Craft Industry Alliance, so I listened to Abby Glassenberg's interview with Abby Small, who is now running Simplicity.com. So if you don't know that whole story, basically what happened was IG Design Group, which is based in the UK, and Design Group Americas included the big 4 pattern companies, as well as some ribbon manufacturers and some other assets. Design Group Americas was purchased by Hilco Capital for $1 plus 75% of the proceeds of any future sales. Abby Small started at the big 4 pattern companies right after college and worked there for some 30 years, ending up as the executive vice president and general manager of Simplicity Creative Group, which owns the big 4 pattern companies. And she saw what was happening after Hilco Capital acquired the company, so she got backing from Rubelman Capital and bought the company. You may have noticed that Simplicity.com was down for a couple of days last week. During the interview that I listened to, she said that they were having to move things because they didn't have access to the servers and some of the other infrastructure. So they were having to recreate some of that, and I think that the website was one of those pieces. I will say that I am very pleased that a sewing-related company has been purchased by someone who's actually in the business and not somebody outside the business who's just interested in making a quick buck. I think that under Abby's leadership, the big 4 pattern companies can continue to exist and even flourish. I think she understands the market, she understands sewists, and I'm hoping for good things going forward. And I don't know about you, but I would be glad of some smooth sailing for a while and a little less upheaval in the sewing world. I feel too like the fall has kind of gotten away from me. I don't know where the time went. I have had a lot of non-sewing things on my plate the last couple of weeks. My father-in-law passed away in February, and we're trying to get the estate stuff tied up before the end of the year, and that involves some paperwork. The insurance company that underwrote the policy, the liability policy for our construction company, decided to drop us. We got a letter in August saying that they weren't going to renew the policy in October. So we had a frantic couple of weeks there where our insurance agent was trying to find another company to underwrite the policy. I've been teaching a fair bit, and it just seems like one thing after another. So, as I said, I did do 2 interviews this week, but rather than post those next week, I decided to do this little catch-up episode because so much has been going on. I'm going to try and get everything back on track, although the holidays are coming up, so please just bear with me if it sounds like I'm a little bit scatterbrained. The podcast is not going anywhere, although I may take a week off around Christmas. We'll just have to see how things shake out. So, as always, I appreciate feedback. If you're so inclined, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You can use the fan mail feature to send feedback, although I can't respond to the fan mail. So if you want a response, the best way to get in touch with me is to use email, and my address is janet@janetzabo.com. I do try to answer all my emails in a fairly timely manner if I'm not traveling. You can also leave a comment at the podcast website. There are show notes for each episode, and the website is www.thestraightstitchpodcast.com. My website is www.janetzabo.com, and that has links to my Big Sky Knitting Designs website as well as my blog, where you can see pictures of what I've been working on and read a little bit more about my projects. I'm curious to hear about other people's sewing disasters. If you've had a machine break in the middle of a big project or some other catastrophe happen, maybe we can do an entire episode on those kinds of stories. So feel free to pass those along. Until the next episode, I hope you have a great week and that you get to go sew something.